Captain June stood on the bridge of the UES Harmony, watching the alien station grow larger on the main screen. After 300 years of traveling through space, humanity was finally meeting another intelligent species. His hands were steady, but his heart beat fast. This moment would change everything. The station looked like a giant crystal floating in space. It sparkled with colors that hurt to look at directly. Strange ships moved around it like metal fish swimming through dark water. None of them looked anything like human vessels. "Captain, we're getting a signal," said Communications Officer Lee. Her voice was calm, but June could hear the excitement underneath. "They're speaking in perfect Korean." "Put it through," June ordered. A voice filled the bridge, speaking words that sounded strange coming from an alien throat. "Welcome, humans of Earth. We are the Vorthak Confederation. We invite you to dock at Port 7. We have much to discuss." June looked at his crew. They had trained for this moment their entire lives, but nothing could really prepare them for first contact. "Take us in slowly," he told the pilot, "and keep our weapons powered down. We're here to talk, not fight." The docking was smooth. As they walked through the airlock, June felt the artificial gravity shift slightly. The air tasted different, sharper somehow. Emergency lights cast everything in a blue glow that made his skin look pale. The alien who met them was tall, maybe 8 feet, and looked like he was made of living crystal. Light moved through his body in patterns that might have been thoughts. When he spoke, his mouth didn't move the way a human mouth would. "I am Ambassador Keithon," the alien said. "I speak for the Confederation in this sector. You are Captain June, yes?" "That's right," June replied, trying not to stare. "We're honored to meet you." Keithon led them through corridors that seemed to grow from the walls themselves. Other aliens moved past them, some looking like giant insects, others like walking trees. None of them paid much attention to the humans. The meeting room was circular with no furniture that humans would recognize. Keithon gestured for them to sit on what looked like mushrooms growing from the floor. Surprisingly, they were comfortable. "Your species is young," Keithon began. "You have spread to only 12 star systems. This is limited." "We're still learning," June said carefully. "That's why we're here, to learn from others." Keithon's crystal body flashed with what might have been amusement. "Learning is good. The Confederation has existed for 40,000 of your years. We have much to teach." For the next several hours, they discussed trade agreements and technology sharing. The aliens offered faster ships, better weapons, and medical advances that could add centuries to human life. In return, they wanted access to human manufacturing techniques and something they called biological diversity. Everything seemed to be going well until June asked about their culture. "We'd like to understand how your society works," he said. "Family structures, education, that sort of thing." Keithon activated a display that showed images and text. June's translator worked overtime, turning alien symbols into words he could understand. What he saw made his stomach turn cold. The Vorthak had something called productive units, beings that were small and weak, but useful for dangerous work. The display showed these units crawling through narrow tunnels, handling radioactive materials, and being used in medical experiments. It took June several minutes to realize he was looking at children. "These productive units," June said slowly, trying to keep his voice steady. "How old are they?" "Age is not relevant," Keithon replied. "They are measured by usefulness. When they grow too large for small spaces or begin to develop resistant behaviors, they are recycled." "Recycled?" The word came out like a whisper. "Their materials are used to create new units. It is efficient." June felt his crew tense behind him. Lieutenant Hana's hand moved toward her weapon before she caught herself. Dr. Mina made a small sound that might have been horror. "On Earth," June said carefully, "we have a different approach to our young. We protect them. We teach them. We believe they are our future. Kethon's crystal body dimmed slightly. This is a known human peculiarity. Most species outgrow such inefficient emotional attachments as they advance. Your young consume resources without contributing. They require protection that weakens the whole group. Why do you persist with this behavior? June stood up slowly. The mushroom chair reformed itself as he moved. Because they're children, he said. They're not units or resources. They're individual beings with potential we can't even imagine. Yet. Potential, Kethon repeated the word like it tasted bad. An interesting concept, but potential does not mine asteroids or test dangerous chemicals. Actual productivity does. What about your own potential? June asked. What might your people become if you didn't throw away half your population before they could grow up? Kethon's light patterns shifted to something that felt angry. You speak of things you do not understand. The Confederation has prospered. For millennia using proven methods, your attachment to genetic offspring is a primitive instinct that serves no logical purpose. Maybe, June said, but it's who we are. The meeting continued for another hour, but the mood had changed completely. The aliens offered amazing technologies and vast wealth, but their price was too high. They wanted humanity to join their confederation, to adopt their ways, to become efficient. When they finally returned to their ship, June's crew was quiet. They had all seen the images. They all understood what membership in the Confederation would mean. Captain, Dr. Mina said as they undocked, are we really going to turn down everything they offered? June watched the crystal station shrink in, the distance. Some prices are too high to pay, he said, and some things are too important to give up. What do we tell Earth? Lieutenant Hanna asked. The truth, June replied, that we've met aliens who are more advanced than us in every way, except the one that matters most. They've forgotten how to love their children. As the Harmony jumped to hyperspace, heading home with news that would change humanity forever, June made a decision that would echo through the galaxy. Humanity would not join the Confederation. They would not adopt alien efficiency. They would remain stubbornly, illogically, inefficiently human. Behind them, Ambassador Kethon watched the human ship disappear. In his crystalline mind, he calculated the odds of humanity surviving their foolish choices. The numbers were not good. Species that clung to emotional weaknesses rarely lasted long in the real galaxy. But numbers, as humanity would soon prove, were not everything. The meeting was over, but the real story was just beginning. Across human space, word of the encounter spread. Some called June a hero for refusing the aliens. Others called him a fool for turning down such incredible opportunities. None of them yet realized that this refusal would start a war that would reshape the galaxy forever. Dr. Mina floated in the observation deck of the research vessel Guardian, watching the stars through the transparent aluminum windows. 6 months had passed since the failed first contact, and she still couldn't stop thinking about what they had seen. The images of those small alien beings working in dangerous conditions haunted her dreams. The Guardian was supposed to be studying asteroid formations in the Sigma-7 belt, far from any major shipping lanes. It was quiet work, peaceful work. Exactly what Mina needed after the trauma of meeting the Confederation. She was analyzing mineral samples when the communications array picked up something unusual. At first, it looked like background radiation, but the pattern was too regular, too organized. Quan, can you come look at this? She called to the ship's security chief. Quan pushed himself through the zero gravity of the lab section, his magnetic boots clicking as he grabbed a handhold. He was a big man with gentle eyes, which made him perfect for research ship security. Most problems could be solved with words rather than weapons. What do you have? He asked, looking at her screen. It's a distress signal, Mina said, adjusting the filters. But it's not coming from any human ship. The frequency is all wrong. Alien? Has to be. And it's coming from the inner belt, near the mining platforms. Quan frowned. There aren't supposed to be any alien operations in this sector. The Confederation promised to stay out of human space after the talks broke down. Mina enhanced the signal further. Slowly, images began to appear on her screen. What she saw made her grab Quan's arm so hard, he winced. The images showed a mining facility built into a large asteroid. Ships that looked like Confederation vessels were docked to it. But that wasn't what made Mina's breath catch. Moving across, the surface of the asteroid were small figures in pressure suits that were clearly too big for them. Are those... Quan started. Children, Mina whispered. Alien children working in vacuum. They watched in horror as the small figures moved slowly across the asteroid's surface, carrying tools that seemed too heavy for them. Some stumbled and fell. Others moved so slowly it was clear they were exhausted. We have to do something, Mina said. We're a research ship, Quan reminded her. We have no weapons, no military authorization. If the Confederation is operating here illegally, we should report it and let the fleet handle it. By the time the fleet gets here, those children could be dead. Mina called an emergency crew meeting. The Guardian carried only 12 people, all scientists and technicians except for Quan. Their captain was back on Earth for medical leave, which left Mina as the senior officer. Pilot Hana was the first to volunteer. I can get us close without being detected, she said. The asteroid belt provides good cover. This is crazy, said Engineer Bach. We don't know anything about alien physiology. We can't even communicate with them. We have to try, Mina insisted. Remember what we saw at the station? This is probably happening all over Confederation space. Millions of children suffering while the adults profit. The vote was 8-4 in favor of investigating. It wasn't much of a mandate, but it was enough. Hana piloted the Guardian through the asteroid field with skill that amazed everyone watching. She had trained as a military pilot before switching to research, and it showed. The ship slipped between, chunks of rock like a fish swimming through coral. As they got closer to the mining facility, the situation became clearer and more horrible. The asteroid had been hollowed out in places, creating caves where the children worked in conditions that would kill an adult. The radiation levels were off the charts. How are they still alive? Asked Medical Officer Yoon. Barely, Mina replied, reading the bioscanners. Their life signs are weak. They're dying slowly. The rescue plan was simple because it had to be. They would dock with the asteroid, override the facility's life support to create a distraction, and evacuate as many children as possible before the adult overseers could respond. Everything went wrong from the start. The moment they docked, alarms began screaming throughout the facility. The overseers knew they were there. Worse, the children were so weak and frightened that many refused to come with the humans. Mina found herself in a cave full of small crystalline beings, trying to communicate through gesture and desperation. They looked like miniature versions of Ambassador Keithan, but their light patterns were dim and flickering. Please, she said, knowing they couldn't understand her words but hoping they might understand her tone. We're here to help. One of the children, slightly larger than the others, made a sound that might have been speech. Mina's universal translator caught fragments. Pain, work, no food, tired? That was when the shooting started. Quan's voice crackled over the radio. Mina, get out of there! The overseers are armed and they're not happy. The children scattered like frightened animals. Mina grabbed the one who had spoken and two others who seemed too weak to run. They were lighter than human children, but warm and solid in her arms. The trip back to the Guardian was a nightmare of running through tunnels while energy weapons fired overhead. Hana had the engines running and the docking clamps disengaged the moment they were aboard. As they fled the asteroid belt, Mina counted 37 rescued children in the Guardian's cargo bay. They huddled together, their crystal bodies barely, glowing, too frightened to do anything but stare at their human rescuers. Now what? Quan asked. "We can't take them to a human colony. They need their own kind." "Their own kind were killing them," Mina said firmly. "We'll figure something out." Over the next few days, amazing things began to happen. The children, once they realized they were safe, began to show curiosity about everything around them. They learned basic human words with incredible speed. They figured out how human technology worked just by watching. The one who had spoken first, who Mina started calling Tay, seemed especially bright. He learned to operate the ship's computer systems in hours. When Yoon showed him basic medical equipment, he began suggesting improvements to the design. "It's like their minds were locked away," Yoon observed. "Now that they're not in constant fear and pain, they're becoming themselves." "This is what the Confederation wastes," Mina said, watching Tay work with Engineer Bach to recalibrate the sensors. "This incredible potential thrown away because adults decided children were just tools." But their rescue had consequences. Long-range scanners detected Confederation ships heading toward human space. The aliens wanted their property back, and they were willing to fight for it. "We've started something," Hana said quietly. "This is going to get bigger." Mina looked at the children scattered throughout her ship, finally safe, finally free to learn and grow and become whatever they were meant to be. "Good," she said. "It's about time someone stood up for them." The Guardian set course for the nearest human colony, carrying 37 small passengers who didn't know it yet, but they were about to change the galaxy forever. Behind them, the Confederation prepared for war, unable to understand why any species would risk everything for beings that weren't even their own kind. The answer was simple, even if the aliens couldn't grasp it, because it was the right thing to do. Day checked his cargo manifest one more time before sealing the hold. To anyone watching, he was just another smuggler moving illegal goods between star systems. The authorities expected him to carry weapons, drugs, or stolen technology. They never looked too closely at the life support readings that showed his ship was carrying passengers, small passengers. 3 months had passed since Dr. Mina's rescue of the Vorthak children made headlines across human space. The government had tried to keep it quiet, but word spread anyway. Some people called Mina a hero. Others said she had doomed humanity by making enemies of the powerful Confederation. Day didn't care about politics. He cared about the messages that came through underground channels, desperate pleas for help from places the government would never officially acknowledge, industrial facilities where alien children worked until they died, research stations where young beings were used for dangerous experiments, military bases where juveniles were trained as expendable soldiers. The galaxy was full of horrors that most people preferred not to think about. But once you knew, you couldn't unknow. And once you decided to act, there was no going back. "Day, we're getting another signal," said Yoon from the communications station. She had been a medical officer in the fleet before joining his operation. "Looks like a prison transport in the Rigel sector." "How many?" "Scanner readings suggest at least 200 juveniles. Mixed species." Day felt the familiar weight in his chest. 200 children who would die if no one helped them. But his ship could only carry 50, and the rescue would be dangerous. Some of his crew might not make it back. "Set course for Rigel," he said. His ship, the Free Wind, was built for smuggling. It had hidden compartments, jamming equipment, and engines that could outrun most patrol ships. What it didn't have was weapons. Day believed in running, not fighting. The crew was small but dedicated. Besides Yoon, there was Bach, a communications expert who could hack alien systems like they were children's toys. The pilot was a young woman named Hana, not the same Hana from The Guardian, but someone who had heard that story and decided she wanted to help too. Their first rescue had been a disaster. They managed to save 12 children from a Confederation mining ship, but half his crew was injured in the process. The alien overseers fought like demons when their property was threatened. The second rescue went better. They learned to cut power to the facilities first. creating chaos that let them extract children in the confusion. By the third mission, they had it down to a science, but each rescue brought new challenges. The children they saved came from dozens of different species, with different needs, different biologies, different ways of communicating. Some were afraid of humans. Others were so broken by abuse that they barely responded to kindness. The hardest part was finding safe places for them afterward. Most human colonies wouldn't take alien refugees, especially not children who might grow up to be enemies. The few that agreed to help were overwhelmed within weeks. Foster families struggled to care for beings they didn't understand. That's when Bach came up with the idea for the sanctuaries. There are thousands of uninhabited worlds in human space, he pointed out. Places that are suitable for life but haven't been colonized yet. We could establish facilities there, hidden from both human and alien authorities. That's a massive undertaking, Yoon said. We'd need supplies, equipment, people willing to run them. We'd need believers, Day corrected. People who think alien children deserve the same protection as human ones. It turned out there were more believers than anyone expected. Dr. Mina was the first to volunteer. She brought her expertise in alien biology and a credibility that helped recruit others. Captain June, despite official pressure to stay silent, quietly provided intelligence about Confederation operations. Dozens of scientists, teachers, and medical professionals joined the network. The first sanctuary was established on Haven 1, a world with breathable atmosphere and plenty of fresh water. Within months, it housed 300 children from 15 different species. Watching them play together in the compound's central garden was like seeing the future being born. But the Confederation wasn't giving up. Ambassador Keithon appeared on human news networks, demanding the return of stolen biological assets. He claimed the children were diseased, dangerous, and psychologically damaged by human interference. Some human politicians listened. These beings are not refugees, Keithon declared during one broadcast. They are property of their respective species, taken illegally by human criminals. Harboring them is an act of war. The pressure on human governments was enormous. Trade with the Confederation was worth trillions of credits. Alien technology could solve humanity's energy problems and extend human lifespans by centuries. Some voices argued that saving a few alien children wasn't worth making such powerful enemies. Day didn't care about the politics, but he couldn't ignore the practical effects. Patrol ships started searching smuggler vessels more thoroughly. Safe ports became dangerous. Several sanctuary worlds were discovered and evacuated just ahead of Confederation raid fleets. The operation was getting too big to hide, which meant it was time to stop hiding. We need to go public, Day told his inner circle during a meeting on Haven 3. Show the galaxy what we're really doing here. The decision came together during what the children called sharing time, an evening gathering where the various species taught each other about their home worlds, their cultures, their dreams for the future. Tae, the young Vorthak from Dr. Mina's first rescue, had become something of a leader among the children. He was working on new energy technologies, designs that were far beyond anything his species had produced in centuries. When reporters arrived to document the sanctuaries, he spoke for all of them. The adults of my people told me I was worthless, he said in careful but clear human speech. They said I was only good for dangerous work until I died. But humans showed me different. They showed me I could learn, could create, could hope. The broadcast went out across human space and beyond. Images of alien children playing, learning, building things with their own hands. Testimonies from human caregivers about the incredible potential they witnessed every day. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in from across human space. Volunteers applied to work at the sanctuaries. Most importantly, more children were saved as information about other facilities leaked out. But success brought new dangers. The Confederation issued ultimatums. Several human corporations threatened to cut off trade if the sanctuaries weren't closed. Some colonies tried to expel alien children, leading to protests and riots. Then came the news that changed everything. Admiral, Vextar is mobilizing the Third Fleet, Bach reported during an emergency meeting. Intelligence suggests they're planning to attack the sanctuary worlds directly. Day looked around the room at faces he had come to know well. These people had given up normal lives to save children they had never met. Now they were facing a war they couldn't win. "We always knew this might happen," he said quietly. "The question is, what do we do now?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Tay and the other older children had been working on something in secret. Using salvaged alien technology and human manufacturing techniques, they had built communication devices that could reach across the galaxy instantaneously. "We call for help," Tay said simply. "Not just from humans, from anyone who believes children should be protected." The message went out that night, broadcast on frequencies that would reach every world in the galaxy. It was simple, direct, and impossible to ignore. "This is the Free Children's Network. We are beings from many species who have found safety among humans. Our adults have abandoned us, but we have not abandoned hope. We call on all sentient beings to remember what they once knew, that children are the future, and the future deserves protection." The response would reshape the galaxy forever. But that night, as alarms sounded across Confederation space and war fleets prepared to launch, Day simply held a sleeping alien child and wondered if they had done enough. In the morning, they would find out if the galaxy still had room for those who believed in protecting the innocent. The children slept peacefully, trusting that tomorrow would be better than yesterday. It was a trust that humanity was determined not to break. Tay's hands moved across the holographic display with confidence that would have amazed anyone who remembered the frightened child rescued from the mining facility. At 16 years old by human standards, he had grown into something his own. Species had never imagined possible, a free thinker. The workshop around him buzzed with activity. Gil, a young Zephyrian whose insect-like features clicked and hummed as he worked, was developing new agricultural systems. Beside him, Bomb floated in a specialized tank, her amphibious nature requiring constant moisture as she designed water purification networks that could terraform dead worlds. These were the children that the galaxy had thrown away. Now they were creating technologies that their birth species couldn't even understand. "Sue, Juan, can you look at this?" Tay called to his human adoptive parents. Sue and Juan had been among the first human families to officially adopt alien children. They were both engineers, which helped them understand what Tay was building, but even they were amazed by his innovations. "What are we looking at?" Sue asked, studying the swirling energy patterns on the display. "Zero-point energy extraction," Tay said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "The Vorthak always said it was impossible because matter and energy were separate things, but humans taught me about integration, about seeing connections instead of barriers." One whistled softly. "Tay, this could power entire star systems. That's the idea. No more children working in radioactive mines. No more species fighting over energy resources. It was a pattern happening across all the sanctuary worlds. Children, who had been considered worthless by their birth species, were creating wonders when given the chance to learn and grow in safety. Gil's agricultural innovations could feed billions. His understanding of symbiotic relationships came from being raised alongside dozens of other species, learning how different forms of life could support each other instead of competing. Bomb's water systems weren't just about purification. She was designing entire ecosystems, ways to bring life to barren worlds. Her amphibious nature, which her people saw as a weakness suitable only for dangerous underwater work, became the foundation for revolutionary environmental engineering. There were hundreds of them now, spread across 30 sanctuary worlds, each one developing skills and knowledge that exceeded anything their birth species had achieved in centuries. But the most remarkable thing wasn't their inventions. It was their cooperation. "Meeting time," called Ara, the human xenobiologist, who had become something like a teacher to them all. She was older now, gray starting to show in her hair, but her eyes still lit up when she talked about the children's potential. The common room filled with beings from 24 species. They sat together without any thought of the differences that had kept their peoples apart for millennia. A young Vorthak shared technical specifications with a hegemony warrior breed. Aquarian children played with human toddlers in splash pools designed for both species. "We've received responses to our message," Ara announced. The room went quiet. 3 weeks had passed since Tay's broadcast calling for help, and they had been waiting for some sign that anyone was listening. 7 species have sent delegations to human space, she continued. Not their governments. Individuals, families, groups that remember what we're trying to protect. The children erupted in excited chatter. After years of being told they were alone, that their birth species had abandoned them completely, proof that some adults still cared was overwhelming. "But there's other news too," Ara said, her voice growing serious. "Admiral Vextar's fleet is only 6 days away from Haven 1. The Confederation is coming to take you back." The excitement died quickly. They all knew what going back meant. Return. To slavery, to abuse, to being treated as expendable resources until they died or were recycled. "What do we do?" asked a young hegemony child whose red skin marked him as one of the warrior caste. In his birth culture, he would have been sent into battle at age 12. Here, he was learning to build instead of destroy. "We prepare," Tay said firmly. "We show them what children can accomplish when they're not afraid." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. The children worked around the clock not to build weapons, but to perfect their inventions. They knew that if they were captured, their technologies would be studied, reverse-engineered, and used by the same species that had enslaved them. But if they could demonstrate their capabilities publicly, maybe the galaxy would finally understand what it had been wasting. Tay's energy systems were integrated into the sanctuary's power grid, producing more electricity than the facility had ever dreamed possible. Gil's agricultural pods were set up throughout the compound, growing food at rates that seemed impossible. Bomb's water purification systems turned the facility's waste into pure, clean water that sparkled like diamonds. When the news crews arrived, both human and alien, they found something that defied every expectation about child labor and productivity. "This is what beings can accomplish when they're nurtured instead of exploited," Tay told the reporters. His crystal body glowed with confidence as he demonstrated technology that was centuries ahead of anything the Vorthak had ever produced. The broadcasts went out across the galaxy just as Admiral Vextar's fleet entered human space. The contrast was stark, military vessels coming to reclaim property versus children showing what that property could become when treated with dignity. But not everyone was impressed by the displays of innovation. Stolen biological assets have been contaminated by human ideologies, Admiral Vextar announced to his fleet. Their natural efficiency has been corrupted by emotional attachments and false concepts of individual worth. This infection must be contained before it spreads. The Confederation couldn't understand what they were seeing. In their minds, the children's innovations weren't proof of wasted potential, but evidence of human manipulation. They believed the rescued children had been turned into weapons against their birth species. The first sanctuary raid happened at dawn on Haven 1. Confederation forces landed expecting to find frightened, grateful children ready to return to their proper roles. Instead, they found beings who looked them in the eye and said no. "You are Vorthak," the raid commander told Tay through his suit's translator. "You belong with your own kind. My kind are the ones who protected me when I was dying," Tay replied calmly. "My kind are the ones who taught me I was worth more than the sum of my labor." You are not my kind. The confrontation was broadcast live across the galaxy. Beings everywhere watched alien children refusing to go back to slavery, choosing humans over their own species. For many, it was the first time they had seen children treated as individuals with rights and choices. But the Confederation wasn't deterred by public opinion. They had come to reclaim property, and property didn't get to choose where it belonged. The raids escalated quickly. Sanctuary after sanctuary came under attack. Human defenders fought desperately, but they were vastly outnumbered. Some facilities were evacuated in time. Others weren't. The children who were recaptured didn't go quietly. They had learned from humans that their voices mattered, that their lives had value. Even as they were dragged onto Confederation ships, they continued to broadcast messages of hope and defiance. "We are not property," became their rallying cry. "We are not tools. We are the future, and the future chooses freedom." Those words echoed across the galaxy as war fleets gathered and battle lines were drawn. The Confederation saw rebellion that had to be crushed. Humans saw children who deserved protection. Other species, watching from the sidelines, began to remember things they had tried to forget. Some remembered their own children, sacrificed to efficiency and survival. Others remembered stories their grandparents told about times when families stayed together and protected their young. The galaxy was changing one rescued child at a time, but change came with a price, and that price was about to be paid in blood. As Admiral Vextar's fleet moved toward the next sanctuary world, Tay and the other children prepared for the hardest lesson of their lives, that sometimes, even when you're right, you still have to fight for what you believe in. The children were ready to fight, not with weapons, but with something more powerful, the absolute certainty that they deserved to exist, to grow, to become whatever they chose to be. It was a lesson they had learned from humanity, and it would transform the galaxy forever. Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the tactical display with growing frustration. 3 weeks into the operation to reclaim stolen Confederation property, and the humans continued to resist with an intensity that made no logical sense. The crystalline alien's body pulsed with angry red light as he reviewed the latest casualty reports. His forces had superior numbers, better weapons, and technological advantages that should have made this a simple police action. Instead, they were fighting a war. "Admiral, the humans have evacuated another sanctuary world," reported his tactical officer. "By the time our forces reached the surface, they found only empty buildings." "How are they moving so many beings so quickly?" Vexatar demanded. "Our intelligence indicated the children were confined to specific facilities." "Unknown, sir. The humans appear to have developed new transportation methods. Our scouts report ships that don't match any known human designs." Vextar's light patterns shifted to deep purple, the Vorthak equivalent of a frown. The stolen children were helping their captors. It was the only explanation for the technological advances the humans were displaying. On the planet Haven 3, Captain Nam received the evacuation report with mixed feelings. They had saved another 800 children, but each rescue was getting harder. The Confederation was learning, adapting, becoming more aggressive. "How many more worlds can we evacuate before they catch us?" asked Commander Rin, his second in command. "As many as it takes," Nam replied firmly. "Those children aren't going back to slavery. Not while we can prevent it." The human defense fleet was small compared to the Confederation armada, but they had advantages the aliens couldn't understand. Every ship carried rescued children who had become more than refugees. They were advisors, engineers, and innovators whose insights improved human technology by the day. Tay's energy systems had revolutionized human ship design. Gil's biological computers processed information faster than any artificial intelligence. Bomb's environmental controls let human vessels operate in conditions that would kill conventional crews. But most importantly, The children gave the human forces something the Confederation lacked: absolute moral certainty. Every human in the fleet knew exactly what they were fighting for. The Battle of Haven 3 began at 0600 ship time when Confederation scouts detected the evacuation in progress. Admiral Vextar committed his entire reserve fleet to the attack, determined to capture at least one sanctuary world intact. Lieutenant Saul commanded the escort vessel Protector, one of 12 ships tasked with covering the evacuation transports. His crew was half human, half rescued alien children who had insisted on helping defend their former home. "Contact bearing 27 Mark 15, reported Tay from the sensor station. The young Vorthak's crystal body glowed with concentration as he interpreted readings that would have taken human operators minutes to analyze. "How many ships?" Sewell asked. 37 heavy cruisers, 12 battleships, and approximately 200 support vessels, Tay replied calmly. "Admiral, we're outnumbered 15-1. Sewell felt his crew tense around him. Those weren't good odds by any measure. But when he looked at the children on his bridge, beings who had survived slavery, abuse, and abandonment, he saw only determination. "All ships, this is Protector," he broadcast to the fleet. "We have incoming Confederation forces. Our job is to buy time for the evacuation. Remember what we're protecting. The first exchange of fire lit up space like an artificial star. Confederation energy weapons, designed for efficiency and maximum damage, met human shields powered by revolutionary technology that shouldn't have existed. Their weapons are more powerful than ours," reported Gill from the tactical station, his insect-like features clicking with stress. "But ours are smarter," Tay added, targeting their power. "Coupling on the lead ship, now!" The human fleet fought like no military force in galactic history. They weren't trying to win a traditional victory. They were buying time for children to escape. Every second they held the line meant more young lives saved. Admiral Vextar watched the battle with growing confusion. Human ships were taking damage that should have disabled them, but they kept fighting. Some were using weapons that the Confederation's databases said were impossible. "How are they generating that much power?" his science officer asked. "Those energy signatures don't match any known human technology." The stolen assets, Vextar realized. "They're using corrupted Confederation science against us." The revelation filled him with rage. Not only had the humans stolen Confederation property, they had turned that property into weapons. It was the ultimate violation of natural order. But rage made him careless. When the evacuation transports finally jumped to hyperspace, carrying 3,000 alien children to safety, Vexitar ordered his entire fleet to pursue the remaining human defenders. He wanted to capture at least some of the corrupted children, to study how human emotional manipulation had affected their natural development. That's when Lieutenant Soul made his decision. "All ships, this is Protector," he broadcast on an open channel that the Confederation could intercept. "The children are safe. Our job here is done." His crew looked at him with sudden understanding. They were surrounded, outnumbered, and too far from friendly space to escape. But the evacuation was complete. The children they had sworn to protect were beyond the enemy's reach. "Sir," Tay said quietly, "there's another way. If we surrender, we might be able to negotiate." "No," Sewell interrupted gently. "You kids have done enough. This is our turn." He opened a channel to the Confederation fleet. "Admiral Vexitar, this is Lieutenant Soul of the UES Protector. We're prepared to discuss terms. Surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded." Vexitar replied. "The stolen biological assets will be returned to their proper owners." Soul smiled at the children on his bridge. "That's where you're wrong, Admiral. These kids aren't property. They're not assets. They're our future, and our future chooses where it belongs." He reached for the self-destruct controls. "Saul, No! Tay lunged forward, but human hands moved faster. The protector exploded in a burst of light that could be seen across the star system. In its final moments, Sewell transmitted a message that reached every ship in both fleets. These kids are our future, all of our futures. Remember that. The words echoed across the galaxy as news of the battle spread. A human officer had died, rather, then let alien children return to slavery. The Confederation couldn't understand it. Many human politicians called it wasteful fanaticism. But to the children scattered across dozens of sanctuary worlds, it meant something else entirely. It meant they were worth dying for. It meant their freedom mattered more than politics or profit or the established order of things. Admiral Vexatar salvaged what he could from the wreckage, hoping to find evidence of how the humans had corrupted Confederation technology. Instead, he found logs and personal messages that confused him even more. The human crew had treated the alien children as family. They had celebrated their achievements, comforted their fears, and protected them without expecting anything in return. It was behavior that the Confederation's psychologists insisted was impossible between different species. Admiral, his communications. Officer reported, "We're receiving surrender offers from several human colonies. They're willing to turn over any alien refugees in exchange for protection from our fleet." Vextar's crystal body flickered with something that might have been satisfaction. Finally, the humans were showing proper logical thinking. Property would be returned to its rightful owners. But when Confederation ships arrived at the colonies, they found something unexpected. The human populations had voted overwhelmingly to evacuate the alien children before the surrender negotiations began. Empty facilities and defiant messages were all that remained. "We cannot give you what we know. Longer have," read one message. "The children have chosen their own path, and we have chosen to help them walk it." Across human space, the pattern repeated. Colonies, corporations, and individuals who had never shown interest in alien affairs suddenly became part of the underground network. The rescue operation was becoming a movement. Admiral Vextar realized he was no longer fighting a small group of radical humans. He was fighting an entire species that had decided alien children deserved protection. It was an enemy he didn't know how to defeat. In the ruins of Haven 3, maintenance robots found a message scratched into the wall of the main shelter. It was written in a dozen different languages, representing all the species whose children had found refuge there. Soul's light shines forever. The battle was over, but the war for the galaxy's future was just beginning. And in that war, the side fighting for children had just found its rallying cry. Dr. Aura knelt beside the ancient stone tablet, her hands trembling as she brushed away thousands of years of accumulated dust. The ruins on Kepler 438b had been thought to be empty monuments, dead remnants of a civilization that had vanished. Long before any current species reached the stars, she had been wrong. They all had been wrong. "Jin, are you recording this?" she called to her research partner, a young man whose expertise in ancient languages had proven invaluable. "Every detail," Jin replied, adjusting the scanner that would preserve the tablet's surface down to the molecular level. "What does it say?" Ara's voice was barely a whisper as she translated the symbols. "It's a children's song, a lullaby about parents protecting their young from the darkness between stars." 3 months had passed since Lieutenant Soul's sacrifice had galvanized human resistance. The Underground Railroad had grown into a full-scale rebellion, with human worlds openly defying Confederation demands to return alien children. But questions remained about how galactic civilization had become so cruel to its own young. The archaeological expedition to Kepler 438b was supposed to answer those questions. Initial surveys had detected ruins from at least 15 different species, all concentrated in one location like some kind of ancient meeting ground. If they could understand what had happened here, maybe they could understand how an entire galaxy had lost its way. What they found changed everything. The planet was covered with monuments, not to war or conquest, but to children. massive stone. Carvings showed adult beings of various species teaching, playing with, and protecting their young. Gardens designed for small hands, playgrounds built to accommodate different types of mobility, schools where multiple species learned together. This was a sanctuary world, Ara realized as the evidence accumulated. But not like ours. This was official, recognized, supported by multiple governments. The central monument was the most remarkable discovery, a massive crystal formation that still pulsed with faint energy after millennia of abandonment. When Jin managed to activate its recording systems, they heard voices from the past. "We gather here to pledge protection for all children, regardless of species or origin. In the face of the growing darkness, we choose to preserve innocence, to nurture potential, to believe in tomorrow." The voice belonged to a Vorthak, but not like any they had met. This ancient alien spoke with warmth and emotion that modern Vorthak claimed was impossible for their species. "Ara," Jin said slowly, "look at the date stamps on these recordings." The numbers made no sense at first. Then Ara felt her world shift as understanding hit her. 47,000 years ago, she whispered. "This civilization existed 47,000 years ago, but the Confederation claims to be only 40,000 years old. They worked through the night, uncovering more recordings, more evidence of a galactic society that had been everything the current Confederation was not. Species that protected each other's children. Governments that measured success by how well they nurtured their young. Technologies developed through cooperation rather than exploitation. Then they found the record of what had destroyed it all. The entity in the recording looked like a Vorthak, but wrong somehow. Its crystal body was dark, pulsing with angry red, energy instead of the soft blues and greens of healthy individuals. "The plague of whispers spreads faster than our ships can carry warnings," the dark figure reported. "Entire worlds are losing the ability to feel protective bonds. Parents abandon their children. Communities sacrifice their young for temporary advantages. The infection appears to be artificial in origin." Jin paused the recording. "Ara, are you saying someone deliberately made species stop caring about their children?" "Keep listening," Ara said grimly. The recordings continued, documenting a horror that spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had protected their young for millions of years suddenly turned them into expendable resources. Civilizations that had built sanctuaries for all children began using them as labor camps. But some resisted. The voices from the past told of desperate attempts to preserve the old ways, to remember what it meant to care for the vulnerable. "We are establishing deep archives," said a voice that might have been an ancient human. "If our species survives the coming darkness, perhaps our descendants will remember what we chose to forget." The final recording was the most disturbing. The same dark Vorthak from earlier, but now clearly in a position of authority. The transformation is complete. Emotional attachments to offspring have been classified as mental illness. Protective instincts have been eliminated from our genetic expression. We are more efficient than ever before. The voice paused, and for a moment something almost like regret flickered through its tone. The children's laughter has stopped. The galaxy is quiet now. We have achieved perfect logical order. Ara sat back on her heels, her mind reeling. It wasn't natural evolution. It wasn't survival pressure. Someone engineered this. Someone turned the entire galaxy into child killers. But who? And why? The answer came from the deepest archive, a recording so old that the translation software struggled with the language patterns. "I am Vexmore of the Vorthak hegemony. We have succeeded beyond our greatest expectations. The plague of whispers has eliminated our primary evolutionary disadvantage, the irrational protection of weak offspring. With this burden removed, our species will dominate the galaxy within 10 generations." Ara felt sick. The Confederation hadn't just normalized child abuse. They had been created by it. The Vorthak had deliberately engineered a galactic catastrophe to eliminate their competition, then built their empire on the ruins of civilizations that had cared about their children. "We have to get this information back to Earth," Jin said, urgently. "If people knew the truth about what happened, they'd understand why humanity is different," Ara finished. "We weren't late to the galactic stage. We were spared from the plague." But as they prepared to leave Kepler 438b, they discovered they weren't alone on the planet. A small Confederation research team had been monitoring their activities, and they had heard enough. "Dr. Ara of the Human Expedition," called a voice from the ruins entrance. "You will surrender your findings and submit to Confederation custody." The team was led by a Vorthak who introduced himself as researcher Kelnon. Unlike Ambassador Kethon, this alien showed signs of independent thought, even curiosity about what the humans had discovered. "Your research violates Confederation law regarding historical revisionism," Kelnon stated, but his crystal body flickered with uncertainty. "Historical truth," Ara corrected. "Your people weren't always like this. You had families once. You protected your children once." "Impossible. The Vorthak have always followed logical principles of resource allocation." Ara activated the crystal monument, letting the ancient voices speak for themselves. As recordings of protective, loving Vorthak parents filled the air, Kelnon's body began to pulse with colors that hadn't been seen in his species for 40,000 years. This is not possible," he whispered. "We have always been as we are." "No," Ara said gently. "You've been programmed to be as you are. Your ancestors chose efficiency over empathy, and they made sure their descendants couldn't choose differently. The truth was spreading faster than either side could control it. Human archaeologists weren't the only ones making discoveries. Across the galaxy, ancient sites were being excavated, old archives were being opened, and species were beginning to remember what they had lost. Some reactions were violent. Governments that had built their power on child exploitation couldn't afford to let their populations remember alternative ways of living. Riots broke out on industrial worlds where adult workers learned that their own children were being used as expendable labor. But other reactions gave hope. On the outer worlds, far from Confederation control, small groups began experimenting with something that hadn't existed for millennia: families that stayed together and protected their young. The revolution wasn't being fought with weapons or warships. It was being fought with memory, with the gradual awakening of instincts that had been suppressed but never completely destroyed. In the depths of space, Admiral Vextar received reports of the growing unrest with growing alarm. The humans hadn't just stolen Confederation property. They had awakened something that was supposed to stay buried forever. "Increase security on all archaeological sites," he ordered, "and prepare for full-scale suppression operations. The past must remain in the past." But on Kepler 438b, as Ara and her team prepared to broadcast their discoveries to the galaxy, one of the ancient recordings offered a different perspective. "If you are hearing this, then some spark of love for children has survived the darkness. Hold on to that spark. Fan it into flame. The galaxy has forgotten how to care for its young, but forgetting is not the same as losing forever." The truth was out, and truth, once released, was impossible to contain. The galaxy was about to remember what it meant to protect the future, one child at a time. Tay stood before the assembled Vorthak Council on their home world, his crystal body pulsing with steady blue light that marked him as healthy and unafraid. Around him, the ancient chamber filled with the harsh red glow of traditional Vorthak. Leadership. Beings who had ruled through fear and efficiency for 40,000 years. But Tay was no longer the frightened child who had been rescued from the mining facility. He was 22 years old by human standards, educated in both human compassion and Vorthak technology. He represented something the Confederation had never seen before, one of their own who chose to return by choice, not force. You are a corrupted asset, Council Leader Zekmor stated, his massive crystal form towering over the younger Vorthak. Your genetic coding has been damaged by prolonged exposure to human emotional manipulation. I am free, Tay replied simply, and I'm here to offer that same freedom to our people. Behind him stood 50 other rescued Vorthak, all volunteers who had chosen to return to their birth world despite the dangers. Each carried new knowledge, new technologies, and most importantly, new ways of thinking about what their species could become. The return mission had been controversial, even among the human resistance. Many argued that sending the children back to their birth species was too dangerous, that they would be captured and forced back into slavery. But Tay and his companions had insisted. We can't change the galaxy by hiding, he had told the human council. We have to show our people what they could be. Gil had led a similar mission to the Zephyrian homeworlds, his insect-like features now confident and strong. Where once his people had seen only a weak larva suitable for dangerous work, they now faced a brilliant engineer whose agricultural innovations could feed entire worlds. Your biological signatures are unstable, the Zephyrian hive leader had declared when Gil landed on their primary world. You have been infected with foreign concepts. I have been educated, Gil corrected. I learned that larvae can become more than just expendable workers. We can become innovators, teachers, leaders. The response to these return missions varied wildly across different species. Some governments immediately captured the returning children and tried to reprogram them back to proper compliance. Others were curious about the technologies they brought, but the real impact wasn't on governments. It was on ordinary citizens who saw their own kind speaking with confidence, creating new things, refusing to accept that suffering was the natural order. On the Vorthak homeworld, Ty's presentation to the council was being broadcast to every crystal chamber on the planet. Millions of Vorthak heard him speak about energy systems that could eliminate the need for dangerous mining, about social structures that protected the weak instead of exploiting them. These concepts are illogical, Council Leader Zekmor insisted. Protection of inefficient units reduces overall productivity. Does it? Tay activated a holographic display showing productivity statistics from human colonies. Species that protect their children show higher innovation rates, greater technological advancement, and more stable societies. The numbers were undeniable. Human civilization, despite being newer and smaller than the Confederation, was advancing, faster in every measurable category except military conquest. Furthermore, Tay continued, I have evidence that our species wasn't always as it is now. The archaeological discoveries from Kepler 438b had reached every corner of the galaxy. Ancient recordings of loving Vorthak families, protective Zephyrian communities, and cooperative multi-species societies provided proof that the current galactic order was an artificial construct. Council Leader Zekmor's crystal body flickered, with colors that hadn't been seen in Vorthak leadership for millennia. Uncertainty, confusion, and something that might have been fear. These recordings are fabricated, he declared. Human propaganda designed to destabilize efficient social structures. Then explain this, said another voice from the chamber entrance. The figure who entered was ancient even by Vorthak standards, his crystal body clouded with age but still pulsing with faint energy. Tay had never seen him before, but the council members immediately prostrated themselves. Elder Morthek, Zekmor whispered, you have been in deep meditation for 3 centuries. Why do you emerge now? Because I remember, the ancient Vorthak said simply. I am old enough to remember the time before the Plague of Whispers. I remember when we had children instead of production units. The chamber fell silent. Elder Morthek moved slowly to the center of the room, his aged body casting strange shadows in the harsh council lighting. I remember my offspring, he continued, his voice carrying across the broadcast to every Vorthak on the planet. I remember holding them when they were afraid, teaching them to make light patterns that told stories, feeling pride when they achieved something new. "Elder, you are experiencing memory degradation," Zekmore said desperately. "The medical council should examine—" "I am experiencing memory restoration," Morthek corrected. "These young ones raised by humans remind me of what we chose to forget, what we were forced to forget." The broadcast continued for 6 hours. Elder Morthek shared memories that contradicted everything the modern Vorthak believed about their nature. Stories of families, of protection, of love between parent and child. But more importantly, other elders began to speak. Across the Vorthak Empire, ancient beings who had lived through the transformation began to remember. They told of the dark, time when emotions were classified as illness, when protective instincts were surgically removed, when children became property. The impact was immediate and chaotic. On some worlds, riots broke out as populations demanded to know why their children were being used as expendable labor. On others, government forces cracked down hard, arresting anyone who spoke of the old ways. But on a few worlds, something remarkable happened. Families began to form. Parents started protecting their children. Communities organized to shelter the vulnerable. Ko, one of the rescued hegemony children, wasn't as fortunate as Tai and Gil. When he returned to his warrior species' homeworld, he was immediately arrested and charged with treason against the military hierarchy. His trial was broadcast across hegemony space, intended as a warning to others who might be infected with human ideas. "You have abandoned the warrior's path," the war leader declared. "You show weakness by refusing to send your own offspring into battle." Ko stood straight, despite the chains that bound him. "I show strength by refusing to waste the future on present fears. Explain this heresy. You send children to die in battles that could be won through cooperation instead of conquest. You sacrifice tomorrow's leaders for today's minor victories. That is not strength. That is desperation." The trial was supposed to end with Ko's execution, an example to discourage others from following human corrupted ideas. But something unexpected happened. Young hegemony warriors in the audience began to question why their species sent children into battle when other approaches might be more effective. Ko was executed as planned, but his words spread through the warrior castes like wildfire. Within weeks, several hegemony colonies declared independence from the central military hierarchy, establishing societies that protected their young instead of sacrificing them. Admiral Vextar watched the growing rebellion with growing desperation. The human virus was spreading faster than his forces could contain it. Everywhere the rescued children returned, they brought ideas that challenged the fundamental structures of Confederation society. "We need a final solution," he told his staff during an emergency meeting. "Total elimination of the human species and all contaminated biological assets." But even among his own forces, doubt was spreading. The archaeological evidence was overwhelming. The testimony of survivors was convincing. Most damaging of all, the technologies developed by protected children were clearly superior to anything the Confederation had produced in centuries. Lieutenant, Commander Rextai, Vextar's own tactical officer, raised a question that would have been unthinkable months earlier. "Admiral, what if the humans are right? What if we've been doing this wrong for 40,000 years? The question hung in the air like poison gas. Once spoken, it couldn't be taken back. Vextar's response was swift and brutal. Rextai was arrested for sedition and scheduled for immediate recycling. But the damage was done. The question had been asked, and questions, like truth, were impossible to contain once released. Across the galaxy, the Children's Alliance was growing. Not just rescued aliens and their human protectors, but entire populations that were beginning to remember what it meant to care for the vulnerable. The war was no longer between humans and the Confederation. It was between the past and the future, between fear and hope, between those who would sacrifice children for power and those who would sacrifice power for children. And slowly, Inexorably, the future was winning. President San stood at the podium in the Great Assembly Hall on New Terra, looking out at the most diverse gathering in galactic history. Representatives from 47 species filled the chamber, beings who had spent millennia as enemies now, sitting side by side. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to bridge languages that had never been meant to communicate. 5 years had passed since the revelation at Kepler 438b changed everything. 5 years since the galaxy had begun to remember what it meant to protect children. The transformation hadn't been easy or peaceful, but it had been unstoppable. "Honored delegates," San began, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall and broadcast to billions of beings across the galaxy. "We gather today not as conquerors or subjects, but as species, united by a simple truth. Our children are our future, and our future deserves protection." In the front row sat familiar faces that told the story of how far they had come. Tay, now, a leading voice in Vorthak reform movements, his crystal body glowing with healthy blue-green light. Gil, whose agricultural innovations had ended hunger on 17 worlds. Bomb, whose environmental designs were terraforming dead planets into gardens. These were the children who had been thrown away, now grown into leaders who were reshaping galactic civilization. The path to this moment had been written in blood and hope. Admiral Vextar's final offensive had been massive, desperate, and ultimately futile. His fleets had struck at every sanctuary world simultaneously, determined to crush the rebellion before it could spread further. But the galaxy had already changed too much. When Confederation forces arrived at human colonies, they found entire populations evacuated, the children safely hidden away on worlds that didn't officially exist. When they attacked alien reform movements, they discovered that their own troops included beings who remembered what it felt like to be protected as children. The decisive moment had come during the Battle of New Haven, when Elder Morthek himself had arrived at the head of a fleet of reformed Vorthak ships. The ancient being had spoken directly to Admiral Vextar. "You are the last remnant of a poisoned age," Morthek had said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Your time is over." Vexitar's response had been to order his fleet to fire on the Elder's ships, but half his captains had refused the command. The Confederation Navy had split in half, with reformist captains joining the growing alliance, while loyalists retreated to increasingly isolated strongholds. The war had ended not with a great battle, but with a slow collapse as more and more Confederation worlds chose protection over exploitation, cooperation over conquest. "We are here today," San continued, "because beings across the galaxy chose to remember something we should never have forgotten, that every child, regardless of species or origin, deserves the chance to grow, to learn, to become whatever they dream of being." Behind her, a massive display showed images from across the reformed galaxy. Vorthak children learning alongside human ones in integrated schools. Zephyrian families raising their larvae with pride instead of treating them as expendable workers. Hegemony warriors teaching their young to build instead of destroy. Not every world had joined the transformation. Hardline Confederation remnants still controlled several systems, maintaining the old ways through force and fear. Some species had rejected reform entirely, viewing the protection of children as a dangerous weakness. But they were islands of the past in an ocean of change. "I want to tell you about Lieutenant Saul," San said, her voice growing softer. 5 years ago, he chose to die rather than let alien children return to slavery. His sacrifice became a rallying cry because it represented something the galaxy had forgotten, that some things are worth dying for, and protecting the innocent is one of them. In the audience, many beings bowed their heads. Soul's Light, the holiday commemorating his sacrifice, had become a galactic observance marked by acts of protection and kindness toward children of all species. "Today, we establish the Galactic Children's Protection Accords," San announced. No longer will any being be treated as property because of their age. No longer will children be sacrificed for adult convenience. No longer will the young bear the burdens that should rest on adult shoulders. The Accords had been years in the making, negotiated by committees that included both adult representatives and the children themselves. Tay had insisted that beings who had experienced abuse should have a voice in preventing it. The document was comprehensive. Mandatory education for all children, healthcare as a universal right, protection from dangerous labor, and most importantly, recognition of children as individuals with their own rights and potential. But the real power of the Accords wasn't in their legal language. It was in the cultural shift they represented, the galaxy-wide acknowledgement that protecting the vulnerable made everyone stronger. As delegates signed the Accords, each adding their species' unique mark to the historical document, Sand thought about how different the galaxy looked from 5 years ago. The Vorthak Confederation no longer existed. In its place was the Vorthak Federation, a democratic society where children were treasured instead of exploited. Elder Morthek served as their first elected leader, his ancient wisdom guiding a species learning to love again. The Zephyrian hives had transformed from rigid castes to cooperative communities. Gil's agricultural revolution had eliminated scarcity, making it possible for families to stay together instead of sending children away to work. Even the warrior hegemony had changed, though their transformation had been the most violent. Ko's sacrifice had inspired a civil war that ended with reformist factions establishing the Hegemony Alliance, where strength was measured by protection rather than conquest. In closing, Sand said, I want to read something written by a child. Lita is 8 years old, half human and half Aquarian, adopted by a mixed-species family on Harmony Station. The letter was simple, written in crayon with words that mixed 3 different languages. Dear Galaxy, thank you for letting me grow up safe. I want to be a doctor when I get bigger so I can help other kids feel better. My human mama and my Vorthak papa say I can be anything I want. I think that's true for everyone. Love, Lita. The chamber fell silent as the innocent words sank in. This was what they had been fighting for, a future where a child could dream of becoming a doctor without worrying about being sold into slavery first. As the assembly concluded and delegates prepared to return to their home worlds, San walked through the corridors of New Terra's Capitol building. The walls were covered with pictures drawn by children from across the galaxy, artwork that showed beings of different species playing together, learning together, growing up together. One drawing caught her attention. It showed a human adult and a small Vorthak child holding hands under a sky full of stars. At the bottom, in careful letters, someone had written, "The future is safe." Later that evening, San found herself in the memorial garden dedicated to those who had died protecting children during the years of transformation. Sol's monument stood at the center, but it was surrounded by stones bearing thousands of other names, humans and aliens who had chosen to sacrifice for beings that weren't even their own species. An old man sat on a bench near Sol's monument, watching alien children play in the garden's gentle twilight. San recognized him immediately. "Captain June," she said, sitting beside him. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I come here often," the former starship captain replied, "to remember how it all started. Any regrets about refusing the Confederation's original offer?" June smiled, watching a group of mixed-species children chase each other around the memorial stones with the unconscious joy that only the truly safe can feel. "They offered us technology, longevity, power over countless worlds," he said, "but they wanted us to stop being human. They wanted us to stop caring about children." He gestured toward the playing children. "Look what we got instead." A Vorthak child ran up to them, her crystal body glowing with excitement. "Grandpa June, will you tell us the story about the first meeting?" "Again?" June asked with mock exasperation. "Please, the new kids haven't heard it yet." As June began the familiar tale of first contact and the choice that changed everything, San listened with half her attention. The other half was focused on the children gathered around them. Beings from a dozen species, all safe, all protected, all free to become whatever they dreamed. The story he told was simple. Sometimes the right choice wasn't the easy choice. Sometimes protecting the innocent required sacrifice. Sometimes the future was more important than the present, but the real story wasn't in June's words. It was in the faces of the children listening to him. Children who would grow up in a galaxy where their safety wasn't negotiable, where their potential wasn't wasted, where their dreams weren't sacrificed for adult fears. As the stars emerged overhead, San made a silent promise to the future. Humanity had taught the galaxy to remember how to protect children. Now it was her generation's job to make sure that lesson was never forgotten again. The galaxy was far from perfect. There were still worlds where children suffered, still beings who chose efficiency over empathy. But change, once started, was impossible to stop completely.